Welcome back, folks. You made it to our next session, and we're joined now by Lauren Belomy, Senior Director, Experiences and Products at IMAX. Send us your questions in the Q&A tab, of course. Lauren, maybe why don't you start by setting the stage? What's your damn world at IMAX? What types of asset are you managing?
Hi, all. So I sit in digital at IMAX under the marketing organization. So we're responsible for all the assets that go out to market all of our experiences, film titles across our exhibition marketing and our owned channels and shared channels, and what I call earned and shared with our partners, including studio partners, talent, and filmmakers.
So this is important for the audience. This is not the actual film object themselves. This is not
That is correct. Yeah, I'm sitting here in our Playa Vista headquarters, and the marketing and strategy and entertainment organization are up here, and downstairs we have our post-production team, which handle our digital and remastering process and actually getting our films and experiences out with our partners to the exhibition theaters.
That makes sense. So how did the assets come to you in the first place?
Well, our assets are done in a few ways in partnership with our studio partners and our talent partners. I have a few slides I can go through which give a little bit more context to where our assets come from. I think it might be helpful to take a step back and talk a little bit about where IMAX sits in the ecosystem, because we're a pretty unique entertainment technology player in the ecosystem. And we have a number of new initiatives. So where our assets coming from is diversifying, but the core of our business is, of course, working very closely with our studio partners on getting assets out the door. And I have some slides that I can share where, and you can see behind me where some of our assets are co-created together.
Sure, go for it. Go ahead.
Okay,
and
great.
Share.
Awesome. Okay, let's get started. I'm going to jump in. I think I might be on the wrong slide here. Can you see everything?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So as mentioned, I sit in the marketing organization here. I'm in charge of all things digital marketing. And I just wanted to start with a little bit. I've worked on agency side, I've worked in entertainment, I've worked in marketing technology, and I wanted to share a little bit that I was with DAM on the social media side initially, and a little bit of context about my DAM role and journey is I helped set up Mars Global DAM for product content management and digital asset management for e-commerce marketing across all of our brands and segments and markets, and was in charge of the rollout for transformation. And that was gave me a really good footing into this world, as you can imagine. It's been full circle to come back to IMAX, and I think just a little bit of background. I think most people here know what IMAX is. We have a really great brand love. We, of course, have our theaters, which are uniquely designed. We have our proprietary screens and sound and seating, and we also have quality control centers. We have our projection. But what you may not really realize is that we have our unique partnerships with all of our exhibitor partners. Those relationships are, of course, differentiated across markets. We're a global company. We have over 1,600 theaters in 87 countries and territories. And we also work really closely with all of our studio partners. And we are embarking for the last few years on connecting more direct with our fans. And we really feel that IMAX has a really great reason to connect on a fan level, since we believe that we are bringing fans the best way to experience their fandom in our theater experience. Speaking of assets, and back to your question, Graham, I wanted to share a little bit of our exclusive art. And back to where this comes from is in partnership with studios, depending on titles. And you'll see here, there's different messaging in these titles. You'll see, I know these are small, but you'll see things like experience and IMAX and film for IMAX. And so depending on how we partnered with the filmmaker, with the studio on each title, you may get a different treatment of artwork, and of course, what the promotional campaign is. And so upcoming this summer, for instance, we have Oppenheimer that was shot with IMAX cameras. And recently this year, Creed 3 was shot with IMAX cameras. And so you can imagine, as we're putting together different types of assets, the marketing message that goes along with them. What we're always sort of pushing it on is how much are we leaning into the artwork to help us tell the differentiation of what IMAX is, and how much does an asset in a digital world need to lean on that differentiation versus the messaging that goes along with the asset. And of course, we're talking about very exclusive titles and embargoes, a lot of rights management. And so we have, I would say, a very unique case by case for each title. Of course, we have operational workflows and ways of working with all of our partners, but there's always, because each project is so unique and different, there's always a different story to tell in the asset itself. So our creative team here, we have a really fun time pulling together these exclusive artwork pieces, and then seeing where it fits in with the overall promotional campaign in partnership with the studio. We also have international titles and an international footprint. So over the weekend, Slam Dunk really had a great weekend in China. So you'll see these are examples of international specific artwork, but our assets sometimes are versioned for these markets too. So it really depends on what the initiative is. We also have a live business, IMAX Live. We've been doing events like with Brandy Carlisle, where we have about 246 connected theaters that we can turn on for different types of events. For instance, we did a Creed 3 live premiere where we turned on a domestic carve out of that footprint, where it was a live component was part of that early access screening. And those, when we're dealing with artists and talent like Brandy Carlisle, it's a whole new creative workflow that we're working with, since we're not working with a studio on those type of events. And so we're working with management companies, with talent, and in certain cases, IMAX is taking more of a lead on the asset creation and the promotional campaign. We also have our enhanced business, where if you may have seen all the Marvel titles that you can see in the IMAX enhanced ratios expanded on Disney Plus. But these are really great examples of our new initiatives where IMAX has different and unique asset workflows that we're operationalizing in the past couple years. And I've been here for about a year. And I have a couple of examples. There's a lot of great asset placements that, our artwork goes, but also in partnership with, a lot of studios who are on this call and part of this conference. When you get something like the Resorts World placement, it's extremely dynamic, and we can work together to make something unique if the placement is unique enough. And where I sit from a digital leader, I'm looking to make sure that there's consistency across all of our owned channels, and especially where owned customer relationships are coming in, and making sure that we're giving and providing the right level of information and the right continuity in a campaign standpoint. And so this is just a couple screenshots of some of our own channels, but we are actively updating these to make them shine more and doing really fun stuff with our assets. And on the shared and earned channel front, for instance, I just wanted to share an example of working with our partner IP and co tagging, for instance, where we have filmed for IMAX. And if you think about what would be a way that we appropriately highlight this in a shortened format in an animated moving image on our social media platforms or on our website, if you take it from an MP4 file. So that's the type of stuff that we're working on here. And I just have this last slide about what we're focused on. We're looking into, of course, efficiencies in our operational workflows, and we're looking into more support with automation and AI to help us out. And we've invested in better tracking and analytics so we can understand where our assets are working and go back into the workflow. So I hope that's a bit of helpful information about where we are in the ecosystem. And that's all I have for the slides, Graham.
That's awesome. Actually, there's a couple of things maybe to double click into quickly there. You talked about operationalizing sort of new content or asset workflows. What role do you see your DAM having in that versus, as an actor versus actually owning that and being the driver of a workflow? And I understand it might not be exactly the same answer for all workflows. But how do you approach thinking about that? How do you approach putting your DAM into the right context as you have to deal with a new workflow?
Well, we're in a really interesting place right now where we're as a creative plus marketing plus digital, we're all a part of marketing team. We're looking at how do we best change our workflows. So we're in that process right now. I think where we've been is all of the sort of the way that I've described it is all of our versioning that we do. So you take one film title, you need to make the poster, thousands of different ways. There's been a very consistent and well-oiled machine and a way that we make those. And I think as we try to do more interesting things in the digital space, we're in the process right now of seeing, do we add in widgets into our existing dams? Does digital have our own sort of place where we take things and then we have the autonomy to then, make things, use things like automation and programmatic workflows on things that are more diversified and taking more of a nod. If I really like to look outside of our own industry for inspiration and almost looking at how other really, really large scale ticketing partners and platforms or e-commerce platforms do workflows, and we're looking to move in that direction. So I'm sort of brokering that right now of where exactly are we doing that work.
I think there's a very powerful story in there for audience in how you're taking a lead in that. You're not waiting to be sort of asked or told. You're taking a lead in defining that role.
Yes, I think, yeah. Oh, sorry. Was there a question in there?
No, go ahead. No, go ahead. Please go for it.
Well, yeah, I think that something that I learned in my time at Mars is that there are people, of course, who are doing jobs in organizations. And I think change management sounds really hard and like something no one wants to do. But I think if you step into an organization like I did last June and you say, hey, I've seen a better way that we could be doing something. And I know that there are media partners out there in the world who are doing things, there's adjacent industries. At the very least, can we start talking to other people, having conversations, going to industry, weeks like this and the Henry Stewart conference, either in New York or LA. And I think that spark tends to get sort of like a coalition excited. And I started to set up, do things like I set up demos of technology firms, I send case studies around, and that sort of starts a conversation that's more about, hey, we could be more efficient. We could be spending less money. You could be saving budget. You could be getting the headcount you need to do the more strategic things that you've been looking to do while saving time on more of the tactical stuff. And I think there's like very sort of low-hanging fruit ways that you can get people on board with you to be part of your transformation coalition that don't make it seem like you're, taking away their job or changing the way that things used to be, because people can start to really dig their heels in when you come in and you say, hey, I'm going to be doing a process transformation and changing your workflow. Like, no one really wants to hear that.
That's something very, very powerful in that message there about taking ownership for the space of the content, the assets that you own, the assets you manage, the life cycle they manage, and all the sort of elements of that life cycle that it touches. That might be a whole other like panel session or presentation to do next time. There's something else that you talked about with your slides that I also think is something to explore with the audience. You talked about assets created sort of with a story, with intention. This is not, old assets that you're ingesting for people to find. This is assets that are being created very intentionally with a purpose, with a story behind them. How do you use the tools, the technology, the DAM, to make sure that story goes along with the assets and make sure the assets are used in the right way or the intended way?
Well, we have very strict processes and partnerships with our studio partners and our filmmakers of when something goes out and where it's going to be placed. So there's a lot of intentionality with our plans, and we work hand in hand with the promotional campaigns of a film. So we're mostly being sort of good partners along the journey. And I think for us, where we're able to, we've been spending a lot of time enhancing our metadata, our tracking, and working with our exhibitor partners to really understand how assets are being not only utilized, but how effective they are in the world. And I think the industry is a very complex place. And for instance, to do that, I know it sounds like some of the things when we say we want to achieve them in this industry, and people might feel this on the call in entertainment especially, is sometimes doing very simple things can be very hard in this industry. And I think when you get into the technology side and you're working with partners that have all different systems, they have different ways that they push out their assets. There's different control systems. There's different embargo controls that they can turn on and off. I think what we've been doing organizationally is sort of, as you mentioned, we're trying to take as much control and understanding as we can. And so we're using our DAM systems to sort of distribute, at least to our partners that are sort of the last mile of how it gets to a fan. And I think that's been really successful so far. And I'm sort of stewarding that on the digital front because we're seeing a lot of great energy and a lot of new diverse audiences come into an IMAX theater. And I think it's, as you all know, there's a lot of different ways that someone can encounter your asset in the world today. And I think we have a pretty good way of working with our partners to control the IP, because at the end of the day, there's way too much on the line to get it wrong. And so I don't want to say that we're conservative, but we're certainly careful.
Right. And you mentioned there measuring. And I think on your last slide there, you had tracking and analytics. That's a relatively new horizon in DAM, is actually trying to measure the assets and what's happening to the assets, how the assets are used, and the asset life cycle. What have you found useful and successful in doing tracking and analytics?
At the very least, having more understanding of, and I know it's like step one is where is everything? And then the next step is, okay, how are we then assessing that with the potential impact? And I think there are ways that you can use your digital exhibition marketing and out of home marketing to actually help engage fans, whether it's a QR code or analytics within the ad itself. So we're sort of not quite there yet, but we have been sort of doing we more tests to understand what exactly is showing, for instance, in a theater, if there's like a pre-show exclusive clip, and then do we show that at a certain time, and can we measure that against the overall buzz on social media? And we actually are sort of tying everything in together and getting out of those silos as teams. So it sort of starts with the asset and the asset management and like knowing where that is and having a really good understanding of that, and then sort of correlating that with sales data, with theater data, with customer service data and sentiment. And then we can start to say, hey, we think that these types of assets are moving the needle for us.
How much then do you feed that back into DAM to influence, asset visibility or search, or just the behaviors that your users experience? How much can your users sort of get back out of that measurement?
So we are on the journey, I will use that word, to do that now back into our digital ecosystem specifically. I think we're early on to figuring out how do we optimize things in real time. But that's partially why we're focused on first getting a better handle on our own channels and cleaning that up. We've been really investing in our tech stack and making sure that we have our ecosystem tracked appropriately for all of our data points. So then we can sort of move the needle appropriately with assets per the appropriate segment and cohort. So we've been doing some audience segmentation cleanup, and we actually focused, and I started in June, and the first couple quarters I was focused on making sure our nomenclature and all of our events were appropriately sort of lining up. There was a lot of fragmentation in our ecosystem, a lot of microsites. So we've been working with the technical teams as well to move everything into a centralized technology stack. And this might be familiar to a lot of organizations where you kind of have to have everything connected and talking to each other first, and then we can really accelerate what you're talking about, which is really using that data and analytics to optimize. So I'm very excited. I think we're going to be doing more of that in Q3 and Q4 of this year.
Actually, this is very much a developing space for DAM in general. I think that might be something that we'd love to hear more about in the future as you push that boundary. As a question has come in from the audience back on the IP protections, what types of protocols do you find should be in place to ensure IP protections with your partners? Maybe I'll add a little bit to that. How much do you control that versus how much is that dictated to you by those IP owners?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think where we have control over where the IP shows up, for instance, online, it's a little more straightforward if it's YouTube or Instagram or TikTok or our digital platforms. It gets a little trickier of how things get sent out into the world where an exhibitor partner needs to put it up, or we're relying on a partner. But that's where the DAM has, I think, been really great, where we can be very specific about which asset is going to which partner, and then you use data to track exactly where it's, how it's being grabbed, downloaded, and used. And so, and I think previously and it's not like this doesn't happen, as you all are probably really well aware. You see something and you say, hey, that's the wrong thing. Humans, I still, still human error is still here, but we've made a lot of improvements with clear communication, and then using our systems to actually track what's going where and how it's being used.
Yeah, that makes sense. We have maybe just 3 minutes left here. A little bit of a pivot, because early on in your slides, you talked about your history. And I think you have a rather interesting story about your own personal journey in building a career sort of in and around DAM and in and around content management. You talk a little bit about sort of how you've mapped that out, what tips you would give our audience as they sort of look to develop their careers in the DAM space.
Well, I've always been a really big fan of how powerful the digital asset management foundation is to an organization, whether it's being able to get better data and help understand how do you tell your creative or your marketing teams, give them power and information to make more objective decisions, or if it's doing an archival story, or you're bringing back things from the past and bringing them up. I think what I've always thought is really great is having a digital asset management background and expertise enables you to enable the organization to do so much more. And I think there's a storytelling element in there that I've always, whenever I work with organizations, I'm always looking and figuring out, well, what does this organization care about? What do our customers care about? What does our leadership what do our shareholders think about, whoever is a user, a stakeholder? And then inside the organization, there's always people who are passionate and they see something different, and maybe they just haven't articulated it. And sometimes I just feel like putting your minds together and being open to have more informal conversations outside of official projects sometimes is a good way to sort of get things going. And then you can sort of insert, for instance, all of these operational workflows for digital that I'm talking about was never approved as an actual project. I think it might be soon if we tie it to more stuff in the business, but it's work that I'm able to push forward, and it's seen as being helpful toward our organizational goals. And I think that if you can sort of find those little wins for the organization, it helps you sort of get the support that you need to do what you know is important, but might be either like too technical or too specific for someone higher up to want to invest in.
I think what you describe is really you're positioning your world, the sort of capabilities that you're offering to your organization as a leader. Like you're leading your organization. Like I said earlier, you're sort of not waiting to be told or asked, or you're not waiting to be searched. You're sort of proactively positioning yourself. How do you approach the mindset of your organization to do that positioning?
I think that, of course, it depends on the organization of where you are, how well things are going. In general, though, I think I've I lived in New York for a long time, and if you've been there, you see all the subways says, if you see something, say something. And I always add a third thing, which is do something. And so I sort of, it sounds really simplistic, but it's acknowledging a thing, an opportunity, and then tying that to an action plan or a set of steps. And sometimes it's just a little bit of sort of crumbles to get to the thing you need, but you can sort of, I've always just sort of start doing, and sometimes, you know, it's not for every organization, it can get you in trouble, but for the most part, it finds the right level of energy that organizations are looking for.
I think that's brilliant, and I think you should trademark that, because the Henry Stewart folks are off making merchandise with that on it for next time. You know, that's all the time we have for this session. I'm pretty sure we could keep talking about this for a while longer, but we're out of time. Thank you so much, Lauren. You have an amazing story.
Oh, thank you all so much. And thank you, Graham. I really appreciate being here, and I hope the rest of the day goes well and the week. This is really an honor to share with you all.
Well, and speaking of the rest of the day, there's time now just for you all to refresh your tea or coffee and join the Birds of a Feather session. Find yourself a virtual table in the lounge tab and join the discussions with your fellow attendees. Or you can still visit the exhibition area, meet sponsors and learn the latest news, and we'll see you over there shortly. And then welcome you back here to the main stage in half an hour.